Back off." The slap landed before she'd finished saying it. Not hard enough to leave a mark. She wasn't that kind of person, but firm enough to be unambiguous. The flat of her palm against the side of a forearm that had reached across her, uninvited, to touch her hair, and the sound it made in the crowded hotel bar was sharp enough that the two people closest to them went quiet. The man who'd been reaching pulled back. He was mid-30s, well-dressed, the particular species of handsome that has been told so too many times. He looked at his forearm, then at her. "Easy," he said, and the word was already spinning itself into an excuse. "Don't," she said. She was still holding her drink. Her voice was level. "Don't touch me without asking. Don't ask. And don't say easy like I overreacted to something that was fine." He opened his mouth. She looked at him with the specific patience of a woman who has had this conversation before and won it every time, and is simply waiting for him to understand that the outcome is already settled. He closed his mouth. He picked up his jacket from the bar stool and left. She turned back to the bar. The man 2 seats to her left, who had been watching the whole thing over the rim of his glass with the expression of someone who has just witnessed something that reorganized his understanding of an evening, said nothing. He returned to looking at his drink. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, without looking at her, "That was efficient." She glanced at him. Dark jacket, no tie, somewhere in his early 40s. The kind of still that isn't absence of energy but controlled direction of it. He wasn't smiling. He looked like a man who considered smiling a resource to be spent precisely. He wasn't going to stop, she said. "No," he said. He wasn't. He picked up his glass. "Are you all right?" "Completely," she said. And he nodded once, with the quality of a man filing information, and returned to his drink. She returned to hers. They sat in adjacent silence for 4 minutes, which was comfortable in the way that silences are comfortable only when neither party needs the other to fill it. Then she said, because she was curious and had learned to follow curiosity directly, "What brings someone to a hotel bar alone on a Wednesday?" He looked at her. Something in his expression recalibrated, almost imperceptibly. "Delayed flight. Early meeting tomorrow." He paused. "You? Early meeting tomorrow," she said. "At this hotel? At a company 3 blocks from it. I'm staying here because the room rate was reasonable and I like not being late." She turned her glass slowly on the bar. "You?" "The same company, as it happens," he said. She looked at him more carefully now. "Consortium Acquisition Review?" Something moved in his eyes. Not surprise exactly, more like the reassessment of a calculation that had been based on incomplete data. "Yes," he said. "I'm the external auditor," she said. "Nadia Osei, 9am. She extended her hand. He looked at it for a half-second, just long enough for her to notice, and then he took it. His grip was direct and brief. 9am, he said. He did not give her his name. She didn't press. She finished her drink. She said good night with the clean economy of a woman who means it and has nowhere to be but bed. And she went upstairs, and she did not think about the man at the bar for more than 10 minutes before she was asleep. If you have ever been yourself in a room without knowing who was watching, stay with this. Because the 9am meeting is where everything starts to move. Nadia Osei had been an external auditor for 7 years and a forensic accountant for 4 years before that, which meant she had spent 11 years in rooms where powerful people wanted her not to find the thing she was specifically there to find. She had found it anyway, consistently. Because she had learned early that the most important skill in her profession was not mathematics. The mathematics was straightforward. but the ability to stay completely unimpressed by people who were accustomed to impressing everyone in the room. She had grown up in Accra, and then Brixton, raised by a mother who had been a secondary school mathematics teacher and had the opinion that the world would be considerably better organized if people were required to show their working. Nadia had inherited the opinion completely. She showed her working. She required others to show theirs. She had no patience for numbers that didn't reconcile, and no tolerance for the performance of confidence as a substitute for accuracy. She was good at her job in the way that people are good at things they were built for. The consortium acquisition was a significant engagement, a mid-size logistics company in the Midlands being acquired by a holding group she had been retained to audit independently. The financials had some areas she wanted to look at closely. She had flown up the night before specifically to be rested and on time, because she was always on time and always rested before something that mattered. She arrived in the meeting room at 8:53. There were 6 people already present, 2 from the acquisition target, 2 from the consortium's legal team, 1 from the consortium's internal finance division, and at the head of the table, in the same dark jacket from the bar the night before, the man who had watched her slap someone and called it efficient. He was looking at the door when she walked in. She stopped walking for exactly 1 second. Then she walked to her seat, set down her bag, opened her laptop, and looked at him across the table with the expression she used in every professional room she had ever entered, which was one of complete and settled competence. He looked back at her with an expression she now had additional context for. The consortium's legal representative said, "This is Elliot Crane. He'll be leading the consortium side of the review." Elliot Crane. She had not connected the name to the face because she had not known there was a face to connect. Elliot Crane, the man who had built the Crane Group from a single logistics contract into a holding portfolio valued at somewhere north of $2 billion, who was not supposed to be at an acquisition review personally because men at his level did not typically appear at acquisition reviews personally. He sent people. He reviewed summaries. He did not sit in a room in the Midlands at 9 a.m. on a Thursday. And yet here he was, across the table from her, with the expression of a man who has decided this morning is more interesting than he anticipated. "Miss Osai," he said. Just her name, acknowledging the situation without performing surprise. "Miss Crane," she said, acknowledging it without performing embarrassment. The meeting began. She was, as she always was in professional rooms, herself without adjustment. She asked the questions that needed asking, including several that made the acquisition target's financial director visibly uncomfortable, which was the correct response since the questions were designed to produce visible discomfort in anyone who had something to be uncomfortable about. She flagged 2 areas in the receivable structure that required additional documentation. She noted a discrepancy in the asset valuation methodology that was not fraudulent, but was optimistic in a way that needed to be named and corrected before the review could proceed honestly. She named it. She named it plainly, without softening, in the way she named everything that needed naming. At one point, Elliot Crane's internal finance director started to offer a reframing of the discrepancy that would have made it easier to move past. She waited until he had finished, and then said, with the patience she had demonstrated at the bar the night before, that reframing doesn't change the number. The number still needs reconciling. Elliot Crane, who had not spoken for 40 minutes, said from his end of the table, "She's right. Let's get the documentation and reconvene this afternoon." The finance director stopped talking. The meeting broke at 11:15. People gathered their things. The room began to empty. She was closing her laptop when he appeared at her end of the table, coffee cup in hand, with the unhurried quality of a man who has decided he is not in a hurry. "The receivables flag," he said. "How long have you known?" "Since Tuesday, when I received the pre-meeting documentation," she said. "I wanted to see how it was presented before I said anything, to see if they'd disclose it themselves." Yes, he considered that. "And if they had, then I would have weighted the rest of the review accordingly," she said. "Disclosure before pressure is different from disclosure after it. The number is the same. The character is different." He looked at her with the expression she was beginning to recognize as his version of being genuinely engaged, not warm, not performed, just fully present in the way that some people are fully present and most people only approximate. "Lunch," he said. "I'd like to understand your methodology for the rest of the audit." She picked up her bag. "My methodology is in the engagement letter." "I've read the engagement letter," he said. "I want to understand how you actually work." She looked at him for a moment. "Lunch," she said. They ate at a place 2 streets from the building. Not the hotel restaurant, which he had apparently decided against without explaining why, and which she appreciated because hotel restaurants in the Midlands at noon were not environments in which anyone did their best thinking. They ate at a small Italian place that was full of people who worked nearby and had no interest in either of them. She told him how she actually worked. He listened the way he had listened at the bar the night before, completely, without performing attention, in a way that registered as unusual because most people in rooms with her were either performing engagement or performing indifference, and he was doing neither. He was simply listening and integrating, and occasionally asking a question that told her he had understood the previous thing well enough to identify what was missing from it. She found herself going into more detail than she had intended. At one point she said, "The reason I flag optimistic valuations rather than fraudulent ones first is because optimism is a culture problem, not an individual one, and you can't remediate a culture problem by addressing a single number. You have to show the room where the thinking went wrong before the number appeared." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's not in the engagement letter." "No," she said. "It should be," he said. She looked at him across the restaurant table and felt the specific and slightly disorienting sensation of being understood by someone who had not asked her to explain herself first. The afternoon session resolved the receivables discrepancy and flagged 2 more areas that would require follow-up. She ran the room the way she always ran rooms, without adjusting for the presence of the most senior person in it, because adjusting for presence was how things that needed finding stopped being found. Elliot Crane did not appear to want her to adjust. He appeared to want her to continue doing exactly what she was doing, which she would have done regardless, but was easier to do in a room where the most powerful person in it actively wanted accuracy rather than comfort. The review concluded for the day at 4:30. She was in the hotel lobby when he appeared beside her. "The bar," he said. "Last night." "You didn't know who I was?" "No," she said. "Does it change anything?" he said. "Now that you do." She thought about it honestly, which was the only way she thought about things. Professionally, no. The audit runs the same way regardless of who is at the table. And outside the audit? She looked at him. "That depends on whether you're going to tell me last night was a coincidence or whether you had some prior information about who was doing the external review." Something in his expression moved. The hotel was a coincidence. The bar was a coincidence. The delayed flight was not a coincidence. I delayed it deliberately because I wanted to see the company's operating site after hours without anyone knowing I was there. He paused. "I didn't know who you were until you said your name." She assessed this for accuracy the way she assessed everything. It held up. "Outside the audit," she said, "it changes some things." He waited. "I would have ignored you in the bar if you'd seemed like someone who needed impressing," she said. "You didn't seem like that. That doesn't change, because you have a name I've now heard of." He looked at her for a long moment with that expression, fully present, nothing performed. "Dinner," he said. "Not the hotel, not the Italian place, a restaurant she had not heard of, that turned out to be the kind of place that doesn't need a sign because everyone who is supposed to find it already knows where it is." They ate for 3 hours. She told him about the mathematics teacher mother. He told her about the single logistics contract that had started everything, and the 2 years he had spent running it himself from a van because he couldn't afford a second driver, and the specific quality of understanding that comes from having personally loaded the thing you are eventually going to build a £2 billion portfolio from. She told him about the first audit she had ever done, where the fraud was not in the numbers, but in what had been removed from the numbers, and how she had found it anyway because absence has a shape if you know how to look for it. He said, "That's what you're doing to our finance director. Looking for the shape of the absence." "Yes," she said. "He's going to find the next 2 weeks very uncomfortable," he said. "He should have reconciled the receivables before Tuesday," she said. He looked at her across the table and said, very directly, "I want to offer you a role when the audit is complete." She put her fork down. "Not because of last night," he said. "Not because of this dinner, because the way you ran that room today is the way I've been trying to get people inside the company to run rooms for 4 years, and nobody has managed it, and you walked in from outside and did it without trying." "I was trying," she said. "I always try. I just don't let people see the effort, because the effort isn't the point." "Exactly," he said. "That's exactly it." She looked at him. "What kind of role?" "Head of audit and risk," he said. "Internal, group-wide. You'd redesign the function from the foundation." She sat with it. Not performing deliberation, actually deliberating, because it was a real question, and real questions required real thought. "I have 3 active client engagements," she said. "I'd need to complete them." "How long?" 4 months. "Fine," he said. "And I work the way I work," she said. "I don't adjust the findings for the seniority of the person they're about. I'd terminate you if you did," he said. She believed him completely. She took the role. She completed her 3 engagements first, precisely and on schedule, and she joined the Crane Group on the first Monday of the following spring and spent the first 3 months redesigning the audit function from its actual foundation, not from its stated methodology, which was fine on paper, but from the culture underneath the methodology, which was where the optimism problem lived. She named the culture problem in a board presentation in month 4, plainly and with full supporting documentation, in front of Elliot Crane and 7 other board members, the way she named everything that needed naming. The board was quiet for a moment when she finished. Elliot Crane said, "This is why we hired her." Begin implementation. The finance director who had attempted the reframing in the Midlands was not at the board meeting. He had departed the company in month 2, which was exactly as long as it had taken the new audit function to locate the full shape of what was absent from his reporting. She and Elliot had dinner for the first time outside a professional context in month 5. Not the first dinner. The first dinner that was not in any way connected to work. That was purely and straightforwardly 2 people who had been in each other's orbit for 5 months and had decided to stop pretending the orbit was only professional. He had waited. She had waited. They had both been patient in the specific way of people who know what they have and are not willing to risk it on bad timing. The dinner was at the same restaurant without a sign. Over 2 years later, on a Saturday in October, she stood in a room full of the people who had been present for the actual substance of the preceding years. Her mother in the front row, upright and proud and already running the arithmetic on everything. And she said the words that needed saying with the same directness she applied to everything that mattered. He said yes before she had fully finished. Her mother, afterward, shook Elliot Crane's hand and said, "She showed me the engagement letter. The terms are reasonable." And then she smiled, which was the highest available endorsement. Nadia kept the ceramic dish from her first office on her desk in the group headquarters. The one with the 2 pencils and the broken stapler she had always meant to replace. She kept it because it was hers, from before, and because the things that are yours from before are the things you carry forward, not as evidence of where you started, but as measurement of the distance you've covered from there. She still showed her working. She still required others to show theirs. Some people walk into a room and fill it with the performance of what they want you to think they are. Some people walk in and simply are what they are, without adjustment, and the room has to reorganize itself around that. The second kind are rarer. The second kind are worth the wait. Subscribe, because next week's story begins in an elevator that gets stuck between floors, and the 2 people inside it are not strangers. They just don't know it yet.